Over at Marvel Comics, I really appreciate all of the work that the publisher has done with Patsywalker, also known as the Hellcat. The Hellcat has really intriguing origins tracing back to some romance comics happening very early at Marvel, but the publisher decided to sort of reintegrate Patsy as a superhero into their publishing line. And today we're going to go ahead and look at Patsy's modern adventures. Most recently, we sort of saw her break off a marriage proposal and relationship with Tony Stark and veer off into her very own sort of series and direction. But thankfully, I think one of the most exciting parts about Marvel's newest Hellcat series is that the previous Iron Man author, Christopher Cantwell, is returning to go ahead and introduce some of Patsy's new adventures. My name is Arico Braddock, and today let's go ahead and dive deep into this brand new Hellcat #1. But before we dive deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that like button if you enjoy our videos. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce the solicitation text that Marvel wrote to kind of introduce this new Hellcat series. Leaping from the pages of Christopher Cantwell's Iron Man run, Hellcat is back. Patsy is back on the West Coast, living in a demon house haunted by the ghost of her mother. When someone close to Patsy's inner circle is murdered, Hellcat becomes the prime suspect. Now Patsy must prove her innocence and evade both the police and the supernatural demon Sleepwalkers. To add to the perils she faces, her demonic ex, Daimon Hellstrom, shows up, and that's never a good thing. A supernatural, superhero, murder mystery. I want to introduce the creative team behind Hellcat. This issue is written by Christopher Cantwell, featuring art from Alex Linz. We have colors from KJ Diaz and letters from VC's Arianna Maher. And this issue's cover is illustrated by Pere, Perez and Marte, Gracia. Here's a quick look at the cover over for Hellcat #1. I really kind of appreciate how this cover introduces the sort of more dour and somber tone that we're going to see over in this new Hellcat series. And I want to give a big thanks over to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting this preview so quickly. And also, I want to kind of shout out the designer for the issue, Carlos Lau, for, showing off such a great kind of title sequence and giving this book really kind of a sense of its own. Is the Hellcat property can be tackled in so many different directions, but it actually looks like this series is looking to kind of reinterpret Patsy's life into sort of a crime noir series. And let's go ahead and take a look at some of the artwork over from Alex Linz. I really appreciate the sort of unconventional way that Linz, kind of lays out some of these pages and depicts some of the storytelling throughout the issue. It took me a while to appreciate just how sort of dynamic some of these page layouts and the angular line is on the page. But I really think that this sort of like less is more approach is really able to bring out some kind of fascinating moments in the issue. I love kind of like the sense of perspective that we have on this page that's kind of interspersed by these kind of smaller panels showing little kind of snippets of time. Some artists can be really kind of, stale in how they depict motion, but I really think that Linz's art is so fluid as we get kind of, the tears running down Patsy's face in this one page. And this issue curiously ventures several different points in time, so we get to see a lot of different kind of scenarios over for Patsy. And I really appreciate the fact that Alex Linz and Christopher Cantwell have seemed to dig really deep into this character and have so many kind of interesting things to say about Patsy interspersed into so many different timelines. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this page in particular as well, because it shows kind of a really interesting juxtaposition between Patsy looking kind of so angry in her current kind of like noir entrenched scenario, and then she's kind of thinking back of the sweeter times in her life. And I think that sort of like this second panel up on the page that kind of removes some of the additional details is really able to show a different side of Lin's art. And even the fact that on the page we have sort of, such like a dark and harrowing, final panel. There's also a sweet moment kind of showing Patsy giving a sense of regret. So I really just love how dynamic all of the visuals are throughout this issue over from Alex Lin's. In this story, we kind of see Patsy framed for a murder that she claims she doesn't commit, but has some hazy memories of the situation. And Patsy slowly starts to kind of figure out what superheroes are behind, some of the things that led up to her being framed for a murder, and which kind of villains are operating as well. We get some interesting kind of teases of Patsy's supporting cast throughout this issue, as well as an appearance over from Rick Sheridan, the Sleepwalker. I think there's so many sort of interesting characters that are interspersed throughout this particular issue, and I never quite expected who was going to show up next. I would say, kind of going through this issue at first, I had a really hard time disassociating myself and trying to appreciate the fact that, this interpretation of Patsy Walker is a little bit more violent, a little bit more cutthroat. When she remembers her time with Tony Stark, she feels regret, but doesn't really, express much emotion beyond that. So it seems like she's even sort of a little bit emotionally despondent. It's always great to kind of start with a character towards the beginning of their miniseries at the lowest point, because I really do think that gives the creative team the chance to really kind of show more progression with her character when she's able to sort of, redeem herself, live up to some of those expectations, and clear her name. One of the things I really like about this book that is kind of propelled throughout this issue is how Patsy is almost used as a romance character. And I kind of think that the sort of two romances, or the one romance that she embarks on, is undercut nicely by sort of what's developing over with Rick Sheridan. I sort of love the idea of using Patsy as almost like an Archie character who naturally is able to kind of create a love triangle. And while this issue is very, very dark, it really uses some of the romances to help kind of lighten up, certain moments of the tale. And also you get the idea that Patsy is just so kind of caught up in her own kind of head in this issue that it's so nice to get that juxtaposition and to get somebody else comment on what's happening for this character. The more time I sort of invested into this issue, the more I was able to kind of believe that Patsy is kind of so down on herself and really taking things up on her own time. But I really hope that eventually Patsy is able to kind of ease up and rely on some of her friends more as the issues and series sort of develops into the future. I think one thing for Patsy too is she essentially just needs to change her outlook as well, as she's so kind of caught up on the negative aspects of her life that seem to be weighing her down. But I do think that this gives her the chance to undergo an interesting character arc. And one thing that I will note in Christopher Cantwell's run with the Hellcat character is that, when they were embarking on their Korvac saga, Hellcat was always sort of right beside Tony. So she was always kind of right there willing to push things even farther than they could possibly go, which is a really sort of interesting way to kind of seed her kind of mental state within this issue. And I really enjoyed the fact that Cantwell was able to kind of, sew those plot threads between the two different series. So those are my thoughts over on Hellcat #1. I think this is a pretty solid issue of the series. There's some really kind of beautiful, fluid, and expressive artwork over from Alex Lin's. But I just hope at some point that Patsy is going to be able to kind of put some of her demons to rest and appreciate the spot where she is in her current superhero career. Well, I want to know from you, what were some of your thoughts over on Hellcat #1? Did you appreciate this issue? And what were your thoughts on some of that gorgeous art? Well, thank you guys so much for coming to check out the video. You know that we'll be back with more excellent comic book content, going over Hellcat, Iron Man, and everything new over in the Marvel Universe. I want to thank you guys so much for coming to check out the video. And once again, we'll be back really soon here with more excellent comic book content. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.